Ari Lewis Show.
Here to break down the postseason. Back to the program from Kew Garden Hills, Radio Mike. Radio Mike, how you doing out there?
Okay, good. How are you?
Doing great. So first thing I want to get into is the discrepancy between the National League and American League as far as interesting teams. All the exciting teams are in the NL. You have the Dodgers, the Cubs, the Cardinals, the Mets. Then the AL are a bunch of teams that either are in small markets or some teams, some fans don't care about the teams. The Rangers, the Blue Jays, the Royals, the Astros. What do you make of that one team is top-heavy with the interesting teams?
Well, that's the way it just broke down this year. They have some great stories in the American League. Toronto hasn't been in the playoffs in, 22 years. They might not be in the playoffs much longer either. But, they're all basically small market teams, and Chicago and St. Louis, people love that matchup, and the Mets in L.A., that's a classic matchup, and it's even going to get better. This is the year of the NL as far as marquee. That doesn't mean that any team from the National League is definitely going to win the World Series, but it makes for good headlines and excitement.
Yeah, let's start with the American League. The Royals are defending AL champs, and before the season started last year, they were 50-1 to win the World Series. Odds weren't so good this year. People thought that was a fluke. It is not, and even though they're a small market and maybe don't have the biggest names on their team, they play a great form of baseball, a team game, a lot of strategy involved, a lot of pitching. They almost play like a National League team.
Yeah, well, I didn't think they were going to make it this year. They did add a couple hitters, and they're right back there. They had the best record in the American League. But they're going to have the next matchup against Houston, which is the winner of the wild card. They beat my Yankees, but they're going to be going against Dallas Keuchel, and he's just a fantastic pitcher. So Kansas City is going to have their hands full in the next game. They always say that Game 3 of a series is really, really pivotal, and you should have just about your best pitcher going in Game 3, even more so than Game 1. Keuchel, if Houston goes up 2-1, all they have to do is win one of the next two, and they'll knock out Kansas City.
See, Radio Mike, the Yankees are still involved even when they're not involved. They do lose that one-game playoff to the Astros. CC Sabathia goes into rehab for alcohol abuse. I'm kind of thinking, couldn't he have waited after the postseason? Your thoughts?
Well, they said that he's had problems. No one knew about this, but there were problems during the season. You heard there was some sort of skirmish up in Toronto. There was a problem in Atlanta. You don't pay attention to it because ball players and, they go out. Maybe there might be a problem, might be a fan. But sometimes if there's too much smoke, there is a fire there, and there was a problem. And obviously he couldn't wait any longer. The sad part is the last 5 games that he pitched, after he was on the disabled list and he got a knee brace, he actually was pitching pretty well. So maybe he should have had his, some drinking and stuff like that and just let him pitch through it. But obviously it was too hard. And, if you're an alcoholic and I guess it was out of control, it really needed to be addressed at the time. It's alcoholism. Alcoholism is a serious illness.
Yes, and it certainly does not discriminate against rich people. CC Sabathia, one of the wealthiest players in Major League Baseball history, saw an issue, and he is in rehab. So Astros are in. They beat the Yankees, really dominating that one-game playoff. And, again, as you mentioned, playing the Royals. Now, you were pretty high on the Astros before the season started, as I remembered, correct?
No, I wasn't that high on them. I thought that they would do well. I thought they had a chance of winning the division. I wasn't sure. I mean, they were coming along. They have a couple stars in Altuve, a couple young players. I mean, Keuchel did have a good season last year. This year he really, really put it all together. I was high on them, but I didn't think they would be this good. And, they have a fairly good chance of beating Kansas City. It is tied 1-1. Anything can happen in the next 3 games. But I was high on them. They're exciting. They're young. They're hungry. And, they hit a lot of home runs. It's either home run or a strikeout with them. They're a good team.
But the Astros seem to have the advantage because two of the three next games are in Houston, and as you mentioned, they have their top ace going in Game 3. So give us your prediction what will happen in the next three games between the Astros and the Royals.
Well, I think Houston might win the next two games, and once you go up 2-1, anything can happen in that fourth game. Just because you have an ace like Geico pitching doesn't mean you're definitely going to win, because no one goes 35 and 0 in the season. But he's so domineering, and it seems like when he pitches at home this year, he's 15 and 0 at home. Of course, he goes to Yankee Stadium and he shuts out my Yankees. But he's going to be pitching at home, and he might be pitching again a couple innings in Game 5. All hands on deck if needed, and that would be on the road in Kansas City. And I would probably pick Houston at this point.
Yeah, they seem going to have the advantage. Of course, this is a short series. First round is 5 games, so things can turn very quickly. One of the years the Giants won the World Series, they were about to get swept by the Phillies, and there was an error in the ninth. The Giants win that game, win the next two, and win the NLCS, and then go on to win the World Series. Again, we're joined by Radio Mike here on the Ari Lewis Show on Israel Sports News Radio. We're going to stick with the American League, go to the other series, and, of course, talk about Texas Rangers versus the Blue Jays. Blue Jays, the interesting team probably of all the teams, Radio Mike. They really backed their way in the postseason. Through the back door, didn't exactly finish strong. It was kind of like who didn't want it the most between the teams in the AL, and the AL is usually the most dominant division. So what do you make of the Blue Jays representing the AL East?
Well, Toronto did win the division over the Yankees, I think, by about 6 or 7 games. They did come on very strong after the trade deadline when they got Tulowitzki, and they got a couple other pitchers. Their hitting is the best by far in all of baseball. They have Encarnacion, Donaldson, Bautista. Those are great hitters, and if they wake up, they can still make a series out of it, and they can still beat Texas, even though they're down 2-0. Now they're going to play in Texas. I'm not very high on the next starter for Texas. That's Martin Perez. He's 3-6. He's not one of an elite top pitcher. David Price, maybe he'll actually come up and pitch a really good playoff game, and actually he's lost 6 games in a row. So, you think you get the best pitcher in the world, and he's 0-6. He has the worst record losing streak in baseball right now. I would not count Toronto out, but their odds of going on and winning the next 3 games, it doesn't look too good, but I certainly would not count them out at this point.
Okay, but if you had to make a prediction for this series, what do you think happens?
The smart money says Texas will pull it out. My heart, I still think that Toronto's not finished. I think it's still, I would say it's a 50-50 chance, even though the betting odds would say that it's probably only a 5% chance that Toronto comes back and wins the next 3 games. I would still say that Toronto will pull it out.
Wow, okay. All right, very interesting. I'm going to say I feel like Toronto will win Game 3 and then lose Game 4. That'll be my prediction. But Radio Mike saying the Blue Jays have the ability to pull out and win this in 5 games. Certainly they have, and again, small series, short series, anything can happen. Let's turn our attention to the National League, more exciting teams. And first go Mets versus Dodgers, a rematch of the 1988 NLCS. And you have the 2 biggest markets in the United States going against each other. And probably 2 of the 3 Cy Young candidates for the Dodgers. And the Mets, start with them, that story, because 2 years ago they looked dead in the water, the whole Madoff scandal, the Mets lost all that money. A friend of mine pointed out that may have been an advantage for them, because instead of going after this high-priced free agent talent, they ended up building the team from the farm system the way you're supposed to, and now they have a lot of great young players.
Well, that's an interesting point, but this is the first year that at the trade deadline they actually did get a couple players. They got Cespedes, but they got a lot of these players for like nothing. I don't even know who they gave up in Cespedes. It was a low-ranking player in the minors who would never really amount to anything, so they really got him on the cheap. They got Kelly Johnson also for almost nothing. They got Uribe, who happens to be injured right now. I don't know if he's on the roster even, but they got a lot of players, role players. They got Tyler Clippard from the Nationals, which was a little bit surprising. But they didn't give up anything. They actually made, right before the trade deadline, they added like 4 or 5 players that have made a big, big difference, and that's what pushed them over to the Nationals. I mean, no one thought the Nationals would be that bad and that the Mets would win the division by 7 games. Also really, really very, very surprising. But, yeah, this is the first time they actually made a move, and the question is, what are they going to do in the off-season? Would they go ahead and go further and actually spend some money and maybe try to re-sign some of these ball players? Cespedes has really had a great 2 months with the Mets. And, but it is true that they really have built the team around the farm system, and it's really paying off with their great pitchers.
Talk a bit about Citi Field, because there was talk they were going to set the stadium a certain way, I believe, for the hitters, and then they kind of went a different direction. Just talk a bit about that. What do you think they will move the fences in or move them back? What do you think they will do with Citi Field?
Well, at Citi Field, when it first opened up, the Mets couldn't hit a home run out of the park. Possibly the other team didn't have that much of a problem, but the Met players certainly couldn't hit a home run. They had Jose Reyes, so we were hoping that he'd be able to hit a lot of triples with a big outfield there. That didn't really help too much. Eventually, Jose Reyes went to Toronto, of all teams. And then they've moved in the fences actually twice. And now it's becoming more like a normal park. It's still probably not the best hitter's park for home runs in baseball, but it's getting more tolerable. And the Mets do have a couple players that, have some power. And but if anything, they're going to either keep it the same or move the fences in, because fans love to see home runs.
No doubt about that. You talk about David Wright, I believe 32 years old, Mets legend, and when he retires, we'll have all the Mets records pretty much, and this is perhaps his real only chance to go to a World Series. I mean, he was very young on the 06 team when Beltran struck out in Game 7, and he's going to have a chance now. Is this David Wright's, I don't want to say his only chance, but at the end of the day, will we say this is his best chance?
Well, the Mets, they have such great pitching. They have such great pitchers. You saw in the first 2 games in Syndergaard. He pitched a great game last night. He didn't win the game. He deserved a little bit better. The bullpen stinks, and they gave up a couple runs after he left the game. So he's a future star. Obviously, DeGrom is an ace of any staff. You have Steven Matz. He's injured right now, but he has a lot potential. Matt Harvey is going to be pitching Game 3. They have a lot of great starting pitchers, and they have some decent hitters out there that could use another bat or two. But, they need another relief pitcher or two because their bullpen stinks. But they could be back. They could be a power for the next 4 to 6 years easily.
It's interesting. A lot of people say the same thing about the Cubs. Our Cubs are also young, and if they don't get it done this year, they will certainly have more cracks on it. But sticking with the Mets-Dodgers series, the series tied 1-1. Heading into Game 3, I feel like the Mets have an advantage, even though they lost Game 2. And the momentum's on their side. They'll be playing, I think, the way they want to play in Citi Field. Your thoughts? Yeah,
well, the next 2 games are going to be in Citi Field. It's just incredible how the city is so much behind the Mets right now. I have tickets for the Mets. I bought them, just in case they made the playoffs and went to the World Series. So I went out on a limb and bought tickets. And I actually have a $42 ticket way out in the outfield, high up. And I could actually sell that ticket for $400. So the fans are going to be absolutely crazy tomorrow night, Monday night, and Tuesday night. And, that has to help a little bit, give a little bit more momentum to the Mets. And, maybe they'll put it together. And, if, they get some good starting pitchers performance and they don't blow it with their relief pitchers, they can actually win the next 2 games and go on to the championship series.
Let's talk a little bit about these two franchises because, as I mentioned, the two biggest markets in the United States. But when you talk about success, especially World Series success, it's been pretty limited. Mets won in '86, Dodgers won in '88, and then neither team has won a World Series since. And not just that, pretty much a scarce amount of postseason appearances, especially with the Mets side. After '86, they went there in '88. 99, 2000, 2006, and this is the fifth time. So is that part of the excitement? I mean, the Mets haven't been to the playoffs in 9 years.
Yeah, well, that certainly adds to it. But it's also, that what happened in Game 2 with the, Utley
that slide,
that slide right into the Mets shortstop, and Flores broke his leg. Even though, you teach the guy to break up the double play, slide hard, that's part of baseball. His back was to the play, so he broke his leg. I mean, he has hit him and slid into him before. But of course the Met fans, they thought it should have been interference, should have been a double play, all different things. It really has the Met fan really, really irate, and it could be the next two games. It could be a war out there. I mean, they might be throwing at players if Utley decides to. If he is put into an at bat, he really shouldn't wear just a baseball helmet. He should wear an armor suit because whatever pitcher is going to be pitching, I don't know how he's not going to be throwing at him because you break one of your teammates' leg, you have to retaliate. It doesn't make a difference even if it's a clean slide, and this certainly wasn't a clean slide. He was like about 4 to 6 feet off the bag and went for him to break up the double play, which is somewhat legitimate, but nevertheless, you do have to stand up for your teammates, and it's going to be a very interesting game number 3 and 4.
Radio Mike, did you think the slide was worthy of a suspension?
No, I don't. A lot of New York Met fans would disagree with me. That's baseball. Baseball is you're supposed to break up the double play. He didn't break his leg on purpose. If you take a ball and you're throwing it at a guy, sometimes the ball just slips, and sometimes you're throwing it at the person. There's no way. I mean, as I said before, Flores he was Tejada. I'm sorry, Tejada. He was his back was towards the slide. You got to, he didn't get out of the way enough. It wasn't the cleanest slide, but it wasn't the dirtiest slide. It's not warranted a suspension or anything like that.
Again, this is the Ari Lewis Show here on Israel Sports and News Radio, joined by Radio Mike from Kew Garden Hills. We're breaking down the first round of the Major League Baseball playoffs. So, Radio Mike, what is your prediction for the rest of the series between the New York Mets and the Los Angeles Dodgers?
I think the Mets, because they do have a lot, their hitters are much, much better than the Dodgers. I mean, the Dodgers do have a couple of good guys like Adrian Gonzalez, but he's not really hitting well. Some of their pitchers, some of their players, like their catcher, Grandal, I think he has 4 hits in his last 85 at-bats, and he's the starting catcher. Carl Crawford, he's just a horrible hitter at this point. I don't know why he's playing in Major League Baseball altogether. Puig, he's been a real problem for the Dodgers. They don't really have the hitting. The hitting really goes to the Mets. Don't have great hitting, but their hitting is certainly better than the Dodgers. The starting pitcher, I think, might be a push. It might be a little bit better for the Dodgers, but the relief pitchers are better for the Dodgers. Everything is pretty close, but I think the Mets, because they have better hitters, should take the series.
All right, and let's move over to the fourth series, something that touches my heart because the Cardinals and Cubs have been rivals since I can remember, even though kind of like the Yankees and the Red Sox are rivals, or where a hammer and a nail are rivals. Cardinals would win consistently. Cubs haven't won a World Series since 1908. Cardinals won the World Series just a few years ago, back in 2011, and we're in the series 2013. Nevertheless, they are playing against each other. The Cubs look red hot. We had Gil Hoffman on a couple of days ago. He actually said he wanted the Cardinals. He thinks the Cardinals are old, and he thinks they're beatable. Your thoughts, Radio Mike?
Well, somehow the Cardinals always win. I mean, the second best team in Major League Baseball are the Cardinals. I mean, the Yankees have won 27 championships. I think the Cardinals have won 11 or 13 World Series championships. The Cardinals, they lost one player, another player. They lose Pujols. It doesn't make a difference. They go back to the World Series. Every year somehow they end up being a good team. They've won 100 games this season. You certainly can't count out St. Louis. The next game is really, really a fantastic matchup. When you have the wild card team winner, Chicago beating Pittsburgh, that gives the team a tremendous amount of momentum. It gets the team on a high, gets them ready for the next series. Even though they lost the first game, they were shut out the first game by St. Louis, but they go ahead and they win game number 2. Now, this game number 3, you have a great pitcher for St. Louis, Michael Wacha. Now, I would have thought that Michael Wacha should have started game 1. But then again, what I said before is sometimes you want to have your best pitcher pitching game number 3 because it's such a pivotal game in game number 3. You'll go up 2-1, or you might clinch the series. Hopefully you're not down 2-0 when you're pitching in game 3. But Wacha, at 17-7 this past season, he's a good pitcher. He could be very good in getting the St. Louis the 2-1 game lead. However, he's going against a pitcher who in the last 10 to 15 games has been like Superman, Arietta. He shut down Pittsburgh in the one-game playoff. He was 22-6 in the regular season. I'm going to go out. Well, I'm not going out much on a limb, but I think whoever wins this game will win the series. It's going to be a game number 3. Watch out, Chicago and St. Louis. Whoever wins that one should win the series.
How good is Jake Arrieta? You're talking about a guy in the second half of the season that hit more home runs than he gave up. I mean, this guy is the Cy Young winner this year, right?
Yeah. Well, there you go. It's really hard to say, on St. Louis. I mean, Kershaw had a great regular season again. Peavy, I think he was the ERA leader. I would go with. I would probably say that's true. But, he's 22-6 for Chicago. I would say he's the Cy Young Award winner, but I certainly wouldn't minimize the pitchers from the Dodgers. Kershaw had a terrific regular season. Of course, it's unfortunate he never does well in the playoff. He loads the bases full in Game 1 against the Mets, and then David Wright gets a single, and the Mets go ahead and they win 3-1. That was a big, big win for the Mets. They had to win one game on the road. Out of the first 2, they did. Unfortunately, they didn't win last night, but once again, you have David Price. He's lost his last 6 decisions in the playoffs, and you have Kershaw. These are great, possibly Hall of Fame pitchers, and he's lost his last 5 playoff decisions.
Yeah, it's truly incredible. He's almost like the A-Rod when it comes to pitching. You're talking about a multiple Cy Young winner, but after 162, you want Bumgarner of anyone in the major leagues, at least at this point. Of course, his team's not in the playoffs, so Jake Arrieta is the guy, and whatever it's worth, in my opinion, the one-game playoff should count as part of the Cy Young voting. There was a year in 1998 when the Cubs they had an extra game, and that would have counted as far as the home run race against Mark McGwire. Jake Arrieta won that extra game in a dominant fashion, and I think that should push again the Cy Young. Again, joined by Radio Mike here on the Ari Lewis Show on Israel Sports and News Radio. Let's talk a little bit about the excitement of the fans of Chicago, Wrigley Field. Cubs have not been in the playoffs, I believe, since 2007. Talk about an 8-year drought, and as I mentioned, have not won a World Series since 1908. This period of time, is it the best or most serious time since the Bartman game back in 2003?
Yeah, well, definitely. The Cub fans are really great fans. I mean, they just love their team. Year after year, they put up with them somehow. Whatever can go wrong does go wrong. If the Cubs make it, to the World Series, I'd say 90% of America will be watching them and hoping that they beat any team from the American League. It's not. I mean, it's the whole country is rooting behind the Cubs at this point. Of course, you do have a lot of fans like yourself who are going for the Cardinals, but the Cubs fans are great. The whole country, they love an underdog, and for a while they were rooting for the Boston Red Sox, and they've won 3 World Series since 2003. I hope they don't win again for the next 50 years, but everyone loves the Cubs. You know, and they're a lovable team, and they have a bunch of young, hungry players. And with Arietta, you get that one dominant starting pitcher. It can make all the difference in the world.
You know, by the way, even though I am a Cardinals fan, if the Cubs did win, I actually wouldn't mind it so much. I do appreciate the story, respect the story, and so let's ask you. You think whoever wins Game 3 is going to win the series? Arietta on the mound in Wrigley Field. I think the advantage goes to Chicago. What do you think?
Yeah, I would say, yeah. Arietta has been really, really great. He's on a tremendous high, even better than Waka. I would give the advantage to Chicago. It's going to be an interesting game, and of course, you still have to win the third game and knock out, the best team in baseball, the St. Louis Cardinals. But I think Chicago has advantage and will win the series.
Okay, if you are one of the powers to be Major League Baseball and you could control for ratings reasons of a World Series, obviously you want the Cubs from the National League. But then, who would you want?
Well, I don't know about that. I mean,
okay.
A lot of people would like to see the Mets or the Dodgers. Those are all 4 teams, like you said before. All of them are really great teams. Like you said, I would say if you had to pick one, I would probably go with the Cubs. But the other 3 aren't far behind.
So if you were in charge of who would win the American League ratings-wise, what's the best matchup for a World Series?
That's an interesting question. I would go with the Cubs against Toronto. It might not happen with Toronto. They have an exciting team. They have a lot of power. So it might be the pitching of the Cubs against the power of the Toronto Blue Jays. People like to see home runs. Bautista, Encarnacion, Donaldson, Tulowitzki. That should make for an interesting series. It probably won't happen, but it would be probably my choice in the American League, Toronto. Second choice, I would probably say, would be maybe Houston. They have a lot of young players, home run hitters. That would make for a good matchup, too.
See, it's interesting. I was also thinking the Blue Jays. If you look, there's a couple of reasons. You have the international markets, Canada. That's something different. The home runs, as you talked about. Also, we talk about World Series appearance drought. They have not been in the World Series since 1993. The 3 other teams, Royals last year, Astros 2005, and then, of course, you had the Rangers in 2011 and 2010. So if you talk about drought of a World Series appearance, that would be the Rangers. So that would be something intriguing and would be entertaining game nonetheless. A few more minutes with Radio Mike from Kew Garden Hills on the Ari Lewis Show on Israel Sports News Radio. Let's go real quick to who do you think will win the MVP? Some people think Donaldson, the Blue Jays. Bryce Harper, though, is pretty much a slam dunk in the National League.
Yeah, I would say Bryce Harper. He's had a really great season. Of course, the Nationals, I mean, really, who would have thought that the Nationals wouldn't be in the playoffs? I did predict that the Mets would make the playoffs, but as a wild card team, turns out they would not have made the wild card team if the Nationals played up there to their capabilities. I mean, they had the great pitchers, 2 no-hitters by Scherzer, but he had August and September, he was really, really poor. I would definitely go with Bryce Harper. I mean, I think he had 42 home runs. I would go with him, definitely.
I believe we both picked him right before the season started to win the MVP.
Yes,
okay.
That's correct. I believe we both picked him. That
right.
He would put it all together, and he certainly did.
All right, we didn't pick Jake Arrieta, but he kind of came out of nowhere to some degree, so that's not our fault. And the American League, would you give the nod of Donaldson to the Blue Jays?
Yes.
Okay.
Another guy, actually, I always like to give the MVP to a player or a hitter. I did say that I thought Geichel would have a good season, but he's done so much for his team, Houston. He really propelled them into the playoffs also. I don't like voting for the MVP player to be a pitcher, that their award should be the Cy Young Award winner. But he might win the Most Valuable Player as well. I mean, he had such a great season. He really, without him, the Astros really would not have made the playoffs.
Pretty interesting because, like you talked about, it used to be pretty much a no-no, the idea of a pitcher winning the MVP. You go back to Pedro Martinez in '99. He actually had more first-place votes than Ivan Rodriguez, but two of the writers left Pedro completely off the ballot, believing a pitcher should not win the MVP. But if you look in the recent years, you have Justin Verlander winning MVP for the Detroit Tigers and Kershaw winning MVP for the Dodgers, so people are starting to change their minds. Maybe that will go to the hands of the Houston Ace. All right, Radio Mike, great to have you on. I'm sure you look forward to this first round. We got your predictions down. We're going to see what happens, and I'm sure you're looking forward to it. This is the best time of year pretty much in sports.
Yes, you got all the sports going. You got hockey going on, just started. You have basketball that's going to start soon. Football, we're up to, I think, week number 5 already. This is the best time of the year for a sports fan.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Again, you've been listening to the Ari Lewis Show here on Israel Sports and News Radio. My guest has been Radio Mike from Kew Garden Hills, breaking down the first round of Major League Baseball. Radio Mike, thank you for being on the program.
Oh, my pleasure, as always.
All right, thank you so much, and thank you, everyone, for listening. Be well, stay safe,